The night over the Galactic Empire patrol zone was silent, filled only with the hum of engines and the blinking lights of distant stars. Captain Rallo stood on the command bridge of his cruiser, his eyes fixed on the massive viewing screen. He was a man who had served the Empire for 20 years, a man who thought he had seen everything. But tonight, something strange appeared on the edge of the scanner. The first officer looked at him nervously and said in a low voice, "Captain, we have a contact." Rallos frowned. A contact was not unusual. The Empire monitored hundreds of ships daily. "Put it on screen," he ordered. The viewing screen flickered, and there it was. A single ship, moving fast, too fast. Rallos leaned forward. "Identification?" he asked. The officer swallowed hard. "None, sir. The database shows nothing. It is not in any records." The bridge fell into silence. For the Empire, everything was recorded. Every ship, every design, every engine type. Nothing flew in their space without being documented. Yet here was a ship that the system did not recognize. Rallos felt a chill run down his spine. The ship glided through the darkness like a predator, silent and confident. "Try hailing it," Rallos ordered. The communications officer nodded quickly and sent out the signal. Minutes passed. No reply. "Send again," Rallos said, his voice tighter this time. Another signal, another silence. The officers exchanged nervous glances. "Sir," the sensor officer whispered, "the speed of this ship, it is moving faster than any known vessel. It should not be possible." Rallos clenched his jaw. "Check again." The officer shook his head. "No mistake, Captain. It is real." The captain's heart pounded. He thought of the stories whispered. In training halls, old myths about ships from the forgotten dark. He had never believed them, but now, staring at this impossible vessel, he was not so sure. The ship grew closer, crossing distances in seconds that should have taken minutes. The design was strange, too. It was sleek, sharp, built for speed and power, yet simple in a way the Empire's ships never were. "It looks ancient," one officer murmured. "Not ancient," another corrected, his voice shaking. "Different, like nothing we have ever built." The ship did not answer, did not slow, did not show any sign of fear. It moved like it owned the stars. Rallos gripped the armrest of his chair. "Arm weapons. If it comes too close, we fire." His voice was steady, but inside, doubt twisted in his mind. Could their weapons even touch something like this? The viewing screen showed the ship approaching, its hull dark, almost invisible, except for faint lines of light that glowed softly along its surface. It was like a ghost cutting through the void. "Distance closing," the sensor officer announced. "At this speed, it will cross into our zone within minutes." Rallos swallowed. He could see the unease in his crew. These were trained Empire officers, men and women who had seen war and death. But this was different. This was something unknown. Unknown was dangerous. Unknown meant fear. Suddenly, the young navigation officer gasped. His hands shook as he stared at the design projected on his screen. "Captain," he whispered, his voice breaking. I think I recognize it." Rallos turned sharply. "What do you mean, recognize it? You just said it is not in any records." The officer nodded quickly, his face pale. "It is not in the Empire's records, sir. But I have seen this shape before, in old forbidden images, in stories that were never supposed to be real." The bridge went quiet. Everyone leaned closer, waiting for his words. The young officer spoke again, his voice trembling. "It looks human." The word hit the crew like a thunderclap. Human, a name that should have been erased. A people the Empire claimed had been destroyed long ago, scattered into the void, forgotten. But here, before their eyes, was a ship that should not exist. a ship that carried the shadow of that forbidden name. Ralos felt the blood drain from his face. His hands shook against the cold metal of the chair. If this was true, if this ship was human, then everything the Empire had told them was a lie. The legends whispered in dark corners suddenly felt real. The ship drew closer, ignoring their signals, ignoring their weapons, ignoring their authority. It moved with a purpose, as if it knew exactly what it was doing, as if it had come back for something. On the bridge, no one spoke. Fear hung in the air like smoke. Ralos forced himself to stand, his voice breaking the silence. All ships in the sector, prepare to intercept. No unknown vessel enters Imperial space without permission. But deep in his heart, the captain knew this was not just another ship. This was the beginning of something much larger, something that would shake the stars. And as the dark ship moved closer, silent and unstoppable, every officer on the bridge felt the same terrible truth. The Empire trembled because the ghosts of the past had returned. And they were not weak anymore. In the heart of the Galactic Empire, the council hall stood tall and proud, built from black stone that reflected the power of a rule that had lasted for centuries. It was a place where rulers never showed fear, a place where their voices echoed, with authority across the galaxy. But on this day, fear sat heavy in the room. The council chamber was filled with high commanders, governors of star systems, and the most powerful voices of the Empire. The air was thick with unease as the news spread like fire. A ship had appeared, a ship that should not exist. The High Chancellor, a thin man with cold eyes, stood at the center, his voice sharp as a blade. "Explain to me," he demanded, "how a vessel can appear in our territory and not be in our records. Our archives span 10,000 years. Nothing escapes them." His words were directed at the trembling officer who had brought the report. The officer bowed deeply, his voice shaking. "Chancellor, the records show nothing. Its design, its speed, its very presence. None of it matches anything we know. And there is more." The chamber grew silent, every eye turning toward him. He swallowed hard before speaking. "The ship's design bears resemblance to the human crafts of old." The word human rippled through the chamber like a wave of thunder. A low murmur began, voices rising in disbelief and horror. Some scoffed, others whispered nervously. The Chancellor slammed his hand on the table. "Silence!" The room fell still again, but fear remained in their eyes. One elder, a council member with a face marked by age and wisdom, leaned forward, his voice slow and heavy. "We erased them," he said. "Long ago we cast the humans into the void. Their world was broken. Their fleets were destroyed. They were a primitive species that had no place among the stars. The records are clear." Another voice rose, sharp and filled with dread. "But what if the records lied? What if they survived?" The chamber stirred again, tension rising like a storm. The Chancellor's face tightened. "Even if they survived, they could not have built this. No exiled race could match the Empire's technology. It is impossible." The elder shook his head. "And yet, Chancellor, impossibility is what we face. A ship moving faster than any vessel we command, unregistered, unbroken by our fleets. If this is human, then the Empire is not as invincible as we believed." The words hung heavy in the air. For centuries, the Empire had ruled with iron power, crushing rebellions, erasing histories, bending entire species to their will. But now, in this moment, doubt crept into their proud hearts. Governors whispered to one another, commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Fear was a poison, and it was spreading. A young counselor, braver than most, stood and spoke with fire in his voice. "If the humans have returned, then we must crush them again. Send the fleets. Burn whatever worlds they cling to. End this before it grows." His words found some support, and many nodded, eager to drown their fear with violence. But the elder raised his voice once more, calm but powerful. "Do not be fools. Do you not see what has happened already? 50 warships were dispatched to intercept, and within minutes they were destroyed. This single vessel humiliated our fleets. Imagine what lies behind it." Silence followed, heavier than before. The thought clawed at their minds. One ship could break them. What if there were more? What if an entire fleet of these ghost ships waited in the dark? The Chancellor's hand trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. He looked around at the council, his voice lower now, as if admitting something even he did not want to believe. "If this truly is human, then we face not rebels, but the return of an enemy we thought gone forever." The elder's eyes darkened. "And enemies who were once broken often return stronger. The humans we cast into the void may have built something in the shadows, far from our eyes, something we cannot yet understand." The chamber filled with silence again, but this time, it was not the silence of discipline. It was the silence of fear. Some counselors avoided each other's eyes, others looked to the floor, and a few stared at the ceiling as if searching the stars for answers. Then a governor from the outer rim spoke in a quiet voice. "My people, they tell old stories, whispers passed from generation to generation. They say humans did not die. They say humans swore an oath, that one day they would return and reclaim what was taken from them." The Chancellor's face twisted with anger. "Superstitions, legends meant to frighten children. Humanity is nothing but dust in forgotten systems." But the words felt weak, even to himself. The elder leaned forward, once more, his voice cutting through the Chancellor's denial. "Legends are born from truth, Chancellor. Perhaps those oaths were real. Perhaps that day has come." The council chamber erupted again, voices rising in fear, anger, and confusion. Some demanded war, others demanded retreat. A few even whispered of surrender, though they dared not say it too loudly. In the chaos, one thought became clear to them all. The Empire was trembling. Outside, in the cold void of space, the mysterious ship still moved, silent and unstoppable. It had not attacked yet, but its very existence was a threat, a challenge to everything the Empire believed. The council argued and shouted, but deep in their hearts, they all felt the same truth. Something had awakened, something they could not control. And if it was human, then the Empire's age of dominance might soon end. In the shadows of the great chamber, the elder whispered words that only a few heard. Words that carried the weight of prophecy. "The ghosts we buried have returned, and they will not forgive." Long before the present day, before the Empire stretched its banners across the stars, there had been another chapter of history that was never spoken aloud, a chapter buried under lies and rewritten scrolls. The Empire had erased it from official records, yet pieces of truth survived in whispers, in forbidden books, in half-burned ruins scattered across forgotten worlds. That chapter was the story of humanity. The Empire had once encountered humans when they were young among the stars, still building crude ships, still learning the ways of space. They were small in number compared to the mighty civilizations. The Empire had conquered. But they were bold, too bold for the rulers of that age. Where other species bent their knees, humans resisted. Where others surrendered, humans fought with a fire that surprised even the oldest races. The Empire at first laughed at them, calling them primitive, calling them children who played with fire. But the laughter turned to anger when the humans did not break. Even with inferior weapons, even with smaller fleets, they fought battles that shook entire systems. They used creativity where the Empire used brute force. They turned desperation into courage, and their will was unyielding. To the Empire, this resistance was dangerous, not because humans were stronger, but because they were stubborn. Stubbornness spreads. One race refusing chains could inspire 10 more, and so the Empire made a decision that would echo through the ages. They declared humanity too dangerous to live. In a campaign of fire and steel, they struck Earth and its colonies, burning them to ash. Cities turned to dust, fleets were shattered, billions were cast into silence. The Empire told the galaxy that the humans were gone, erased, nothing but a failed race that dared defy the order of the stars. The records were rewritten, the truth buried under stone. For generations, the name of humanity became nothing more than a forbidden word, a shadow in the corners of history. But shadows always remain, and whispers cannot be killed so easily. Some remembered, some carried fragments of truth. The soldiers who had fought against humans told their children of battles where humans bled but never surrendered. Merchants who had seen human ships spoke of designs that seemed to carry a soul of their own. And in the darkest corners, there were those who said that not all humans had died. Rumors spoke of exile fleets that had vanished into the void, fleeing beyond known space, into the silent abyss where no Empire ship dared travel. At first, these stories were dismissed as ghost tales, the fantasies of those who feared the night. But as centuries passed, the whispers grew. Some claimed that humans had found hidden worlds, places rich in resources far from the Empire's reach. Others claimed they had discovered technologies that the Council had forbidden, knowledge that even the most advanced species feared. The Empire ignored these tales, but fear lingered in their leaders' hearts. Why else had they ordered strict bans on old human artifacts? Why else had they punished anyone caught speaking of humanity? Deep down, they feared the truth, that the humans had not only survived, but that they had grown. And now, with the sudden appearance of the mysterious ship, fear returned like a wound reopened. For the first time in generations, the Empire faced the possibility that its ancient crime had not ended as planned. The young officer who had recognized the design had not been mistaken. He had seen forbidden images once, hidden in his family's archive. The hull, the sharp angles, the purposeful simplicity. It was human, no doubt. But this ship was not like the crude machines of old. This one was refined, advanced, faster, and stronger than anything in the Empire's arsenal. That meant the whispers had been true. Humanity had survived exile. Humanity had built in silence. Humanity had returned. In the private chambers of the High Council, when the public had been dismissed, some leaders dared to speak their darkest fears. One governor leaned close to another, his voice low and filled with dread. "Do you remember the stories of the Oath?" The other nodded stiffly. The Oath was an old myth, older than the current chancellor himself. It was said that when Earth burned, when the last cities turned to ash, the surviving humans swore a vow. They would not forgive. They would not forget. One day, no matter how long it took, they would return. The Oath was dismissed as a bedtime story, a fantasy to frighten children of the Empire. But now, with the evidence in the skies, with a ghost ship moving like no ship should, it did not feel like a story anymore. It felt like destiny. Across the Empire's vast territories, whispers began to spread again. On frontier worlds where loyalty was thinner and fear greater, some people rejoiced quietly. They remembered the legends of humanity's fire and courage, and they began to hope that maybe the Empire could fall. On conquered planets where chains still weighed heavy, the idea of humans returning brought sparks of rebellion. And among the soldiers of the fleet, discipline was tested by unease. No one wanted to admit it, but the thought of facing humans again filled them with dread. In the great archives of the Empire, guarded by silence and shadows, there were scrolls and data locked away from all but the highest eyes. These were records that told the real story of the war against humans. They spoke of battles where fleets of 100 ships could not break a handful of human vessels. They told of commanders who underestimated human strategy, only to be outmaneuvered and destroyed. And they told of the last desperate cries of humans fleeing into the void, their final transmissions filled with rage and promises of return. The Council had buried these records, but truth does not rot in the dark. Now it was returning to the light. And as the mysterious ship cut across the stars, faster and stronger than anything they could stop, the Empire's lies began to crack. Humanity had not been erased. Humanity had endured. Humanity had sworn an oath. And now the galaxy would discover what it meant to fight a people who never surrendered, who never forgot, and who had been waiting in silence for the day of reckoning. For the first time in centuries, the Empire trembled. Not at an enemy's guns, but at the ghosts of its own past, and at the thought that those ghosts had come back to collect their debt. The mysterious ship drifted into Imperial space like a shadow with purpose, silent and unbroken, and yet its presence pressed down on every sensor, every mind, every beating heart that watched it. Across dozens of star systems, fleets were put on alert, weapons charged, and orders screamed through communication channels. But the ship did not slow, it did not hide, it did not run. It simply moved, steady and fearless, as if the entire galactic empire meant nothing to it. On the bridge of the Imperial command ship Sentinel, Admiral Curvin stood with his jaw tight, his eyes never leaving the screen that displayed the intruder. He was a man who had fought countless battles, crushed rebellions, silenced uprisings, but never before had he felt such a weight pressing against his chest. He turned to his officers. "Send another hail. Demand its identification." The communications officer obeyed, his hands trembling slightly as the signal pulsed out into the void. Seconds stretched into minutes, and again, silence was the only reply. Frustration burned in the Admiral's eyes. "Open every channel, every frequency. If they can hear us, they will respond." The officer did as told, sending wave after wave of signals, opening frequencies both old and new, even those so ancient they had not been used in centuries. And then, at last, the silence broke. The speakers on the bridge crackled, and a voice, calm and steady, filled the room. It was not metallic, not distorted, not alien. It was human. "We hear you," the voice said. Every officer froze where they stood. The Admiral's eyes widened. The voice was deep, controlled, almost cold, but it carried weight, the kind of weight that only came from someone who had seen too much and endured even more. The Admiral forced himself to respond, his voice harder than he felt. "Identify yourself. This is Imperial space. State your origin and purpose." For a long moment there was silence again, the crew holding their breath. Then the voice returned, sharp as a blade hidden in velvet. "Your empire forgets too easily. But we do not forget. We warned you long ago. You should have listened." A shiver ran through the bridge. Officers exchanged looks of dread, their thoughts filled with the forbidden stories of humans, the old whispers of their defiance, their destruction, and their vow of return. The Admiral narrowed his eyes, struggling to steady his voice. "If you are who you claim, then you should know the Empire rules these stars now. You are trespassing. Surrender your vessel or be destroyed." The voice on the other end did not rise in anger, did not falter. It remained calm, almost cold, and that calmness was worse than rage. "Destroyed? You tried that once. You failed. You scattered us into the void, but the void became our home. You thought we would die in the dark, but we learned to master it. You thought time would erase us, but time only sharpened us. We are back, Admiral. We are back, and this time we will not warn you again." Gasps filled the bridge, the words striking harder than any weapon. The Admiral's face hardened, though deep inside he felt the same chill his crew felt. "If You are human, then you should know what awaits you. The Empire does not forgive. The Empire does not fall. For the first time, a small sound broke through the calmness of the mysterious voice. It was not a laugh, not quite, but something close, a sound filled with quiet defiance. Then the Empire will learn that humanity does not kneel. With that, the transmission ended, leaving only silence in its place. For a moment, no one spoke, as though the weight of the words still crushed the air from their lungs. The Admiral finally snapped out of his daze. "Signal the fleet. Prepare to intercept. We will see if these ghosts bleed." Orders spread like wildfire, and the Empire's war machine roared to life. 50 warships aligned themselves in formation, their weapons charging, their shields burning bright. The mysterious ship did not flee. It did not slow. It came on like a predator stalking prey, a single shadow against an army of steel. The officers on the bridge whispered to one another, fear breaking through discipline. Some muttered about the oath, others about the legends of human vengeance. The Admiral barked for silence, but the fear was there, unshakable. Across the fleet, gunners took aim, pilots steadied their controls, and commanders raised their voices to mask the trembling in their hands. The Admiral gave the final order. "Target the intruder. Fire on my mark." The ship on the screen loomed larger now, its design sleek and deadly, its faint glowing lines shimmering like scars from another age. And then, just before the command could be given, the ship's lights pulsed, not in attack, but as though it were alive, breathing, waiting. A single word echoed in the Admiral's mind, unspoken but undeniable. Humanity. The forgotten race. The buried enemy. The ghosts of fire and defiance. They had returned, and they had spoken. And in that moment, deep in his heart, Admiral Kervin knew what the Council would never admit. This was not just the arrival of a lost ship. This was the beginning of the reckoning. The humans had warned them. The humans had survived. And now the humans had come back to make the Empire pay. The silence in space broke with fire. Admiral Kervin's hand came down like a hammer, and 50 Imperial warships unleashed their fury. Beams of plasma and streams of missiles cut through the void, lighting up the stars with the Empire's power. It was a storm of destruction, the kind that had crushed 100 rebellions before, the kind that had erased civilizations from history. But the mysterious ship did not break. It moved. Faster than sensors could track, faster than eyes could follow. It danced between the blasts as if the laws of physics bowed to it. Missiles missed their marks. Plasma beams cut through nothing but empty space. The ship slid past them, twisting with impossible grace, every movement planned, every turn perfect. On the bridge of the Sentinel, Admiral Kervin gripped the railing, his voice sharp. "Titan formation, box it in, do not let it escape." His commanders obeyed, ships shifting into a trap meant to surround the intruder. But the ship did not try to escape. Instead, it charged forward. One Imperial cruiser fired a broadside of plasma, but the intruder tilted, slipped past the fire, and released a single burst of light. The cruiser shuddered, split in half, and exploded into burning fragments. Shock filled the fleet. It had not been a missile, not a beam, nothing like the weapons they knew. It was something else, something beyond their understanding, something far more efficient. Panic rippled through the comm channels as officers shouted, "It destroyed the Ceres with one shot!" Another ship tried to ram it, desperate to crush it by sheer force. But the intruder spun, almost playful, and with a flash, the attacker was gone. Nothing left but drifting wreckage. The human ship did not slow. It sliced through the Imperial fleet like a predator among prey. One by one, mighty warships fell, each destroyed faster than the last. The Empire's proud fleet, the terror of the galaxy, was being humiliated before their own eyes. On the Sentinel's bridge, officers shouted reports, their voices filled with fear. We can't lock weapons. Its signature keeps shifting. Our shields don't register its attacks. It's like the energy is bypassing them entirely. We've lost the Draxon, the Vera, the Iron Spear. Admiral Curvin's face turned pale. He had faced defeat before, but never like this. Never against a single ship. His voice cracked as he gave the only order left. Pull back. Regroup. We need reinforcements. But it was too late. The intruder had already torn through the formation, striking and vanishing before they could react. Explosions dotted the black sky like dying stars. One officer whispered, unable to stop himself. It's a ghost. We are fighting a ghost. The admiral glared but said nothing because deep down he felt the same. Finally, when half the fleet had been annihilated, the mysterious ship slowed. It stopped among the drifting wreckage, the broken corpses of Imperial steel floating all around it. The voice came again, echoing across every channel, reaching every surviving ship. Calm, steady, merciless. You still do not understand? We did not come here to run. We came here to show you the truth. Your fleets are nothing. Your power is nothing. The Empire is nothing. The words cut deeper than any blade. Silence filled the survivors' ships. Fear, shame, disbelief. They felt it all. For the first time, the great empire had been brought to its knees by a single vessel. Admiral Curvin tried to speak, tried to sound strong, but his voice shook. Who are you? What do you want? The answer came like thunder. We are humanity. We are the ones you cast into the void, the ones you thought broken, the ones you tried to erase. You failed. We survived. And now we return. Every officer froze as the voice grew colder, sharper. You burned our worlds. You hunted our children. You buried us in silence. But the silence became our forge. In the darkness, we built what you cannot imagine. In exile, we became stronger than your entire empire. The mysterious ship pulsed with light, and for a moment it looked like a living thing, a predator flexing its claws. This is only the beginning, the voice finished. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the ship vanished. One instant it floated. Among the wreckage, the next it was gone, leaving nothing but silence and ruin behind. The surviving Imperial warships drifted in shock, their systems broken, their crews broken even more. Admiral Curvin stared at the empty screen, his voice a whisper. Humans? His officers dared not speak, but the word echoed in their minds, burning into them like fire. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. Humanity had returned, not weak, not primitive, but stronger than the Empire itself. And this was only a single ship. What if there were more? What if an entire fleet existed? The thought was too much, but it was real, and it spread through the Empire faster than light. Rumors turned to fear, fear turned to panic, and soon, across the stars, whispers filled every world. Humanity was back. Humanity had not forgotten. And humanity was not afraid of the Empire anymore. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy trembled not at the might of the Empire, but at the shadow of those they had once tried to destroy. And deep in that shadow, unseen by the trembling council and broken admirals, more ships began to stir, waiting for the signal, waiting for the time to rise. The galaxy had barely recovered from the shock of the single human ship when the true storm arrived. In the aftermath of the battle, Imperial survivors limped back to their stations, carrying stories of an intruder that moved like a ghost and destroyed fleets like they were toys. Those stories spread faster than the Empire could silence them. On border worlds, fear took root, but in hidden places, whispers of hope began to rise. If humans were alive, if they had grown powerful, then perhaps the Empire was not eternal after all. In the Great Council Hall, the High Chancellor raged at his commanders, demanding answers they could not give. They spoke of impossible speeds, impossible weapons, impossible tactics, and above all, a name that should have remained buried: humanity. The Chancellor shouted that humanity was gone, that this was nothing but a trick, but even as he spoke, his voice carried doubt. And then came the transmission that silenced the galaxy. The mysterious ship, the same that had destroyed 50 Imperial warships, reappeared on the edge of a major star system. But this time, it did not come alone. It transmitted a signal across every channel, a message that every ship, every planet, every living soul could hear. The screen lit up with the image of the ship, and then a voice, calm and steady, filled the stars. "We are humanity. You cast us into the void, but the void became our home. You thought we would die, but we learned to live. You thought time would erase us, but time only made us stronger. We return not as victims, but as the builders of a new destiny." And then the stars behind the ship seemed to ripple. At first, the Imperial scanners thought it was a distortion, some trick of the light. But then shapes began to emerge from the dark. One ship, then 10, then 100, then thousands. A fleet stretched across the horizon, vast and unending, larger than anything the Empire had assembled in centuries. They were ships of many designs, sleek, angular, alive with strange energy, but they all carried one mark, a single emblem painted bright on their hulls. A blue and white sphere, the symbol of Earth, a world the Empire had sworn was ash. Humanity had not only survived, they had built an empire of their own, hidden beyond the edges of known space. The Ark of Terra, the ship that had revealed itself, first now stood at the front of the fleet like a leader. Its lights pulsed again as the voice continued. "For generations we endured the silence. We built in the shadows, in the places you feared to go. We mastered engines faster than light, weapons that cut through the void, shields that no blade can pierce. While the Empire feasted on the weak, we grew in strength, and now we return." Across the Empire's systems, fear spread like wildfire. In the council hall, some leaders cried out in panic, others demanded immediate war, but their voices sounded small against the image of thousands of human ships covering the stars. On rebel worlds, chains were broken, banners of defiance were raised, and people cheered with tears in their eyes. "The humans are back," they cried. "The humans will fight the Empire." On military outposts, officers argued in secret, their loyalty shaking as they remembered how a single human vessel had destroyed a fleet. What chance did they stand against thousands? On the Ark of Terra, inside its command bridge, Admiral Elias Kane stood at the center. His face was weathered, his eyes sharp, his uniform simple compared to the golden robes of the Empire. Around him, his officers waited, men and women who were born in exile but raised with a single purpose: to return. Kane spoke, his voice steady, carrying the weight of centuries. "This is not only vengeance, this is justice. The Empire burned our worlds, but they will not burn us again. Today we stand not as survivors, but as a people reborn. Let the galaxy see that humanity bows to no tyrant." His words were transmitted across every channel, reaching soldiers and civilians alike. To some, it was a warning. To others, it was salvation. The Imperial fleets scrambled to form defenses, but even the most loyal commanders felt dread as they stared at the human armada. The Empire had ruled unchallenged for centuries, but now it faced something new, something ancient, something it thought it had destroyed. Humanity had returned, and they had returned stronger. As the Ark of Terra moved forward, leading the fleet, the stars seemed to tremble. One human officer looked at the screens filled with Imperial ships preparing for battle and said softly, "They still think we are the same as before." Admiral Kane's eyes hardened. "Then let us show them what exile taught us." The human fleet advanced, engines burning brighter than suns, weapons ready, shields alive with power. On every world, on every ship, on every station, beings watched in awe and terror. The galaxy was about to change forever. The empire that had once erased humanity now faced them once more. And this time, humanity carried the fire of 1,000 years of rage. This time, they would not be erased. They would be remembered. And as the fleet of Terra stretched across the heavens, its presence alone sent a message louder than words. The age of silence was over. The age of humanity had begun. In the great capital of the Galactic Empire, the council hall shook with voices of fear and rage as news of the human fleet spread. The councilors sat in their high seats, draped in robes of power, but the fear in their eyes betrayed the truth. They had seen the images, the endless wave of ships rising from the void, carrying the mark of a world they swore was ash. The humans had returned, and not as broken survivors, but as masters of a fleet stronger than anything the Empire could bring. The High Chancellor pounded his fist on the stone table, his voice sharp and trembling with both fury and doubt. "This is nothing but a trick," he shouted. "One fleet cannot break the Empire. We have stood for centuries, and we will not fall to ghosts." But his words did not fill the chamber with confidence. Councilors looked at one another in silence, their faces pale, their hands shaking. Finally, one of them, Governor Arthas of the Outer Rim, spoke in a low voice. "Chancellor, the people are not listening to your words anymore. On my worlds, they are chanting the name of humanity. They are whispering of freedom, of rebellion. They believe the humans will bring an end to your rule." His words stung, and the chamber erupted in argument. Some shouted that they must rally the fleets and crush the humans before hope spread. Others warned that the fleets had already tasted defeat, that sending more ships would only lead to greater humiliation. A few, braver than most, whispered that perhaps the humans were right, that perhaps the Empire had become a shadow of itself. The High Chancellor silenced them with a glare, but the seeds of doubt had already been planted, and he knew it. Outside the chamber, on countless worlds, the cracks were spreading even faster. On conquered planets, where the Empire's banners flew, people gathered in secret to hear the forbidden message that had echoed across the stars. The humans were alive. The humans had returned. The humans had defeated the Empire's fleets. For species that had been broken for centuries, that message was more powerful than any weapon. Chains began to feel lighter, guards began to feel vulnerable, and rebellions that had long been silent stirred once again. On the mining worlds, workers laid down their tools and whispered that the Empire's time was ending. On the frontier colonies, soldiers deserted their posts, unwilling to fight the ghosts who had defied extinction. Even in the heart of the Empire, whispers of dissent spread through the lower districts of the capital, carried by voices that no longer feared the council's wrath. In the military, discipline cracked. Admirals who had once sworn eternal loyalty now argued in their war rooms. Some demanded overwhelming force to burn every suspected human world to cinders. Others, remembering the wreckage of fleets destroyed, in minutes, hesitated. They had seen what human technology could do, and they were not eager to meet it again. A few dared to ask the forbidden question. What if humanity's strength was greater than the Empire's? What if they could not be beaten? The High Chancellor ordered the suppression of these thoughts, but words are harder to kill than men, and the truth was spreading. Meanwhile, in the hidden command center of the human fleet, Admiral Elias Kane watched reports stream in. He stood, tall, his hands behind his back, his eyes calm as his officers delivered the news. "Our message has reached every major system," one said. "Rebellions are stirring across the rim. Even the core is whispering of collapse." Another officer added, "Imperial fleets are moving to regroup, but they are divided. Some commanders hesitate, others rush to attack. Their unity is breaking." Kane nodded. He had expected this. Humanity's return was more than a battle of ships and weapons. It was a battle of fear and hope, and already the Empire was losing both. He spoke, his voice steady, carrying across the command deck. The Empire is trembling, not because of our guns, but because of the truth. For centuries they told the galaxy that we were dead. Now the galaxy sees us alive. That is enough to break their chains. His words gave strength to his officers. But Kane knew the war was not yet won. The Empire was wounded, but a wounded beast is dangerous, and it would strike with everything it had. Yet humanity had not come unprepared. For centuries in exile, they had planned, built, and united. While the Empire divided worlds and enslaved species, humanity had forged alliances in the dark. Species who had once been silent allies now revealed themselves, standing beside the human fleet. Ships bearing alien banners emerged from the void, flying beside the Ark of Terra. The galaxy had forgotten them, but they had not forgotten humanity's kindness in exile. Together they had built an empire hidden from sight, and now they returned together, united under the promise of freedom. Back in the council hall, panic turned into desperation. The High Chancellor's advisors whispered that entire sectors might rise in rebellion. He demanded control, but control was slipping from his hands like water. His generals promised victory, but their eyes betrayed the same fear that gripped his own heart. The Empire was cracking, not from a weapon, but from a truth it could no longer bury. And across the stars, ordinary people looked up at the night sky and whispered the same words, words that filled them with hope and the Empire with terror. The humans have returned. In that moment, the Empire, once eternal and unshakable, stood on the edge of collapse. It had ruled for centuries with fear, but now that fear belonged to them. Humanity had turned the galaxy upside down simply by existing, and the war that was coming would decide the fate of every world among the stars. And as Admiral Kane watched the Empire falter, he whispered the words that echoed through his fleet like a vow. They thought we were forgotten. Now they will remember us forever. The Empire had always believed its rule was eternal, that its fleets and armies could crush any defiance, but now the lie was unraveling before their eyes. Across the stars, rebellion was spreading like fire, small sparks igniting into storms that no amount of force could stamp out. On the frontier worlds, soldiers who once wore imperial colors now tore the emblems from their uniforms and declared loyalty to freedom. On mining colonies long enslaved, the people rose against their masters, fueled by whispers of the human fleet that had destroyed imperial warships with ease. Even in the capital core, where the Empire's grip was tightest, riots began to break out in the shadow of golden towers. The High Chancellor ordered the suppression of all rebellions, but his commands met hesitation. Admirals who had once obeyed, without question now delayed, offering excuses of distance or unpreparedness, when in truth many feared facing the humans. The Chancellor stood in the Grand Council chamber, his voice filled with anger, but his words carried no weight, for fear had already hollowed the strength of the Empire. Meanwhile, in the command bridge of the Ark of Terra, Admiral Elias Kane studied the galaxy map projected before him. Reports of rebellions reached his ears, and for a moment he allowed himself the satisfaction of seeing the Empire fracture. But he was no fool. He knew the beast was not yet dead. A wounded Empire was more dangerous than a stable one, and he expected the Chancellor to unleash a storm of violence and desperation. His officers stood around him, waiting for orders, their faces determined. One spoke, "Admiral, Imperial fleets are gathering near the core. They are preparing for a strike." Another added, "Our allies call for our aid. The rebellions cannot hold without us." Kane nodded slowly. "Then we will give them more than aid. We will give them the certainty of victory." He raised his hand toward the map. The Empire believes it can still frighten the galaxy. Let us show them what true fear is. We will not hide our strength. We will strike at their heart. Gasps echoed around the command deck. To strike at the core was madness, for the Empire's defenses there were legendary, yet Kane's gaze was steady. If we crush them at their center, the galaxy will see that the Empire is no longer immortal. That is how we end their rule. Across the fleet, messages were sent. The human armada, joined by their allies, began to move with purpose, engines roaring as one. The stars shimmered with the light of their advance. In the core, panic spread as reports of the human fleet's movement reached the Council. The High Chancellor screamed for every available ship to be sent, every defense activated, every weapon prepared. Worlds near the capital were ordered to sacrifice themselves as shields. The council chamber shook with fear as the humans drew closer, their fleet like a shadow spreading across the night. On the worlds that rose in rebellion, the people watched with awe as the human fleet passed, their banners of freedom flying alongside alien allies. To them, the sight was more than ships. It was hope given form, proof that tyranny could fall. Children pointed at the sky, their voices filled with wonder. The humans are here. On the Ark of Terra, Kane walked the command bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. He could feel the weight of history pressing down, generations of exile and suffering carried into this moment. His officers looked at him, not just as a leader, but as a symbol of humanity's return. He stopped before the massive viewing screen, where distant stars stretched like rivers of fire. "They believed us forgotten," he said quietly. "But today we make them remember." His words spread across the fleet, carried through every channel. Pilots tightened their grips, soldiers steadied their weapons, and entire crews lifted their heads with pride. In that moment, they were no longer exiles. They were humanity reborn. In the capital, the High Chancellor stood upon his balcony, staring into the night sky. Reports poured in that the human fleet was drawing near, and for the first time in his long rule, he felt true fear. He whispered to himself that the Empire was eternal, but even he could not silence the tremor in his voice. Then the alarms rang across the capital, filling the night with the sound of dread. The human fleet had arrived. Across the horizon, thousands of ships appeared, their engines blazing with light. They filled the sky like a second dawn, their formation precise, their presence overwhelming. The people of the capital froze, staring upward, their voices caught between terror and awe. And then the Ark of Terra, massive and proud, emerged at the front, its hull marked with the symbol of Earth, bright and unbroken. A transmission filled every screen, every channel, every device. Admiral Kane's face appeared, stern and resolute. His voice echoed across the Empire's heart. "For centuries you ruled with chains and fear. For centuries you told the galaxy that humanity was ash. But we survived. We grew. And we return, not to kneel but to stand. This is the end of your empire's lies. This is the beginning of a new age." Silence followed, heavy and unshakable, as the words sank in. Then the first move was made. The Empire's fleets rose from the capital, their weapons blazing, their engines howling as they rushed to meet the intruders. Thousands of ships clashed in the skies above the core, beams of light cutting through the darkness, explosions tearing the heavens apart. The battle had begun, the greatest the galaxy had ever seen. On the Ark of Terra, Admiral Kane gave the final order, his voice calm despite the storm. "Let them see what humanity learned in exile. Let them see why we cannot be erased. Engage." And with that, the human fleet surged forward, striking like thunder, and the Empire, once eternal, now stood upon the edge of ruin. The battle above the core was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. The Empire had thrown every ship it could muster into the void, a sea of steel and fire meant to crush the human fleet in a single decisive strike. Their formations, stretched for light years, their weapons lit the skies in endless bursts of plasma and energy, and their commanders screamed for victory to protect the honor of an empire that was crumbling beneath their feet. But the humans did not retreat. They did not falter. They came like a storm, their ships cutting through the dark with precision, every movement executed with discipline and unbreakable will. The Ark of Terra led the charge, its massive hull glowing as its shields absorbed the first wave of enemy fire. Beside it flew the Allied fleets, alien vessels that the Empire had forgotten, worlds once broken by conquest that had been rebuilt in humanity's hidden shadow. They fought as one, and their unity was a weapon sharper than any blade. Admiral Elias Kane stood at the center of the command deck, his hands clasped behind him, his gaze fixed on the chaos of battle displayed across the viewing screen. Explosions blossomed like suns, ships shattered into fragments, and the void itself seemed to tremble under the fury of war. Officers relayed reports in rapid tones, shields failing, enemy fleets regrouping, allies requesting support, but Kane's calm voice cut through the storm like steel. "Hold the line. Push forward. Do not give them space to breathe." His words were not loud, but they carried strength, and across the fleet humanity held firm. The Empire fought with desperation, throwing ship after ship at the advancing wave, but the fear that had already infected their ranks could not be hidden. Some captains hesitated, their crews remembering the stories of entire fleets destroyed in minutes. Some fired blindly, breaking formation in panic. And when the humans struck back, their precision was merciless. Wave after wave of Imperial ships burned, their hulks falling into the void. Still, the High Chancellor screamed from his war room, demanding that his commanders fight to the last, demanding that no ship retreat. His face twisted with fury as he saw the reports of his fleets collapsing, but even his rage could not change the truth. The Empire's strength was failing. On the streets of the capital, the people gathered beneath the burning sky, watching in awe as explosions painted the heavens. They had been told the Empire was eternal, that resistance was hopeless. But here before their very eyes, the lie was shattering. Children pointed upward, voices trembling with wonder as they whispered the name of humanity. For the first time in centuries, hope filled the air of the Empire's very heart. On the Ark of Terra, Kane gave the next order. Cut their command. Ships. Leave them blind. Human strike craft swarmed like hawks, diving into the chaos and tearing through enemy communications vessels with surgical precision. The Imperial fleets faltered, their movements becoming confused, their unity shattering. Some ships fired on their own allies in the chaos, others broke apart in retreat despite their orders. The galaxy had never seen the Empire so vulnerable, so human in its fear. Yet the battle was far from over. A massive shadow emerged from the void, the Imperial dreadnought Oblivion, a warship so vast that even the Ark of Terra seemed small in comparison. Its cannons glowed with the light of annihilation, each one capable of tearing entire cities from existence. The Chancellor's voice echoed across every Imperial channel, shrill with desperation but blazing with hatred. Crush them! Burn them! From the stars! The Oblivion fired, and the void lit up as a storm of destruction swept across the battlefield. Allied ships disintegrated in an instant, hundreds lost to the first strike alone. Even the Ark's shields screamed under the impact, their glow flickering dangerously. Officers shouted warnings, but Kane did not flinch. His eyes narrowed as he studied the dreadnought. "Focus all fire on that ship," he commanded. "Break! The monster, and the Empire's spirit breaks with it." Every human vessel turned, unleashing a torrent of firepower at the Oblivion. Beams of energy tore across its hull, Missiles rained upon its shields, and strike craft darted around it like angry insects. But still the beast endured. Its armor was ancient and unyielding, its defenses layered with centuries of imperial might. Blow after blow struck, but the dreadnought pressed forward, tearing through humanity's ranks like a predator among prey. For a moment the tide seemed to turn, and whispers of fear touched even the human crews. Could this be the weapon that crushed their return? On the Ark's bridge, silence filled the air as officers awaited Kane's response. He stepped forward, his voice steady, his tone carrying the weight of command. "Remember who we are. We survived exile. We built in silence. We carry not just weapons, but the will of every world they enslaved. That ship is not invincible. Nothing is." His words reignited their resolve. Humanity fought with fury, driving their ships into the jaws of the dreadnought's fire. Strike craft swarmed into its weak points, blasting open wounds in its armor. Coordinated volleys struck the same targets again and again, hammering until cracks began to spread. The Allied fleets followed, pressing the attack with renewed strength. And then the Ark of Terra unleashed its secret. From deep within its core, a weapon long hidden ignited, a focused energy lance forged in the years of exile, a weapon designed for one purpose, to shatter even the strongest of imperial pride. Kane gave the order, his voice calm as stone. Fire. A blinding beam cut through the void, slamming into the dreadnought's hull. The Oblivion shook violently, its shields collapsing in a burst of light. Explosions rippled across its length as its armor tore apart, and for the first time in its history, the dreadnought screamed in defeat. The people of the capital saw it, their eyes wide with awe as the unbreakable symbol of the Empire began to fall. The Oblivion burned, its massive form breaking apart piece by piece until it was nothing more than a dying star fading into the darkness. Silence fell across the battlefield, broken only by the sound of retreating Imperial ships. The heart of their power had been shattered, and with it their will to fight. On the Ark of Terra, cheers erupted, but Kane raised his hand, silencing the noise. His face was calm, his voice low but filled with iron. This battle is not the end. It is the beginning. The Empire has been wounded, but it will strike again. We must be ready. Across the galaxy, the image of the burning dreadnought spread like wildfire. On oppressed worlds, chains were broken, revolts turned into revolutions, and voices rose in unison, crying out for freedom. The humans had not just won a battle, they had proven the Empire could bleed, and once something bleeds, it can die. In the council chambers of the capital, the High Chancellor stared in horror at the ruins of his pride, his hands trembling, his voice breaking. For the first time in his reign, he did not speak of victory. For the first time, he knew the truth. The Empire was falling, and humanity, once forgotten, was leading the galaxy into a storm that would sweep it away forever. The galaxy was holding its breath as the ruins of the Imperial dreadnought Oblivion drifted in the void like the corpse of a giant slain beast. The flames of its destruction still burned across the black sky, and its fall sent a shockwave not only through the battlefield, but across every world that had once knelt under the Empire's rule. For centuries, the Empire had been seen as eternal, its fleets unstoppable, its power unchallenged, but now the symbol of that strength lay shattered. Word spread faster than any fleet could travel, from mining colonies at the edge of the stars to glittering worlds at the heart of the core. Whispers turned to shouts, and shouts became roars. The Empire bleeds, the Empire falls, and the name carried by those who had returned from exile was repeated everywhere with reverence, with fear, with awe. Humanity. On the Ark of Terra, Admiral Elias Kane stood in silence, watching the battlefield settle into uneasy calm. The surviving Imperial ships had retreated in disarray, scattering like frightened prey, while the human and allied fleets held their positions, weapons ready but hearts steady. The victory was theirs, yet Kane's face remained hard. He knew the Empire was vast, and though the dreadnought was gone, the war was not finished. But something deeper had been won. A wound had been struck at the heart of tyranny itself. "Status of the fleet," Kane demanded, his voice sharp but composed. Officers reported losses, damage, and casualties. Many lives had been lost, but the morale of those who remained was unshaken. The sight of the dreadnought's fall had given them strength, a fire that no despair could extinguish. Kane nodded once and gave the next order. "Transmit to all channels, not just to our allies, to the galaxy." Communications officers turned, their hands moving swiftly across panels. A moment later, Kane's face appeared across countless worlds, projected in streets, homes, and council chambers. His words were simple, his tone steady, yet they carried weight heavier than any weapon. "We are humanity. You cast us into the void to die. You erased our name from your histories. But we did not die. We endured. We built, and we have returned, not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as a people who will never kneel again. The Empire is not eternal. The Empire is not unbreakable. Today you have seen the truth, and we tell you this: the stars belong to all who live under them, not to tyrants who hoard them. Rise, stand, fight for your freedom. The Empire's chains are broken. Do not let them bind you again." Across the galaxy, people wept as they heard his words. They shouted in the streets, tore down the banners of the Empire, and lifted their fists in defiance. Soldiers stationed on distant worlds turned their weapons against their masters. Governors fled their palaces as citizens stormed them. The Chancellor's voice, once iron across the galaxy, was now drowned by the voice of a forgotten race, made stronger by exile. In the capital, the council trembled in fear. The High Chancellor screamed at his advisors, his eyes bloodshot with rage and terror. "They cannot win! They cannot return! Humanity is nothing but ghosts!" But even as he shouted, the truth pressed upon him like a crushing weight. His guards, once loyal to the death, now looked at him with doubt. The people outside the palace no longer chanted his name, but the name of the ones he had tried to erase. The walls of his empire were cracking, and he could not stop it. On the Ark, Kane turned from the broadcast, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. His officers looked at him with admiration and respect, but Kane's gaze remained cold. "This is not the end," he said softly. "The Empire still has fleets. It still has armies. It will fight to survive, but the galaxy has seen its weakness, and that will be its undoing." In the following weeks, the rebellion spread like wildfire. Systems once loyal to the Empire declared independence, raising the banners of freedom. Old enemies of the Empire rallied to humanity's side, some seeking revenge, others seeking hope. Every corner of the galaxy began to burn, not with the fire of oppression, but with the fire of resistance. The humans did not stand alone. They had sparked something far greater than themselves. They had lit a fire in the hearts of billions. Battles raged across the stars. Imperial fleets fought desperately, but without unity, without the aura of invincibility, they were broken piece by piece. Planet after planet fell from their grasp. Entire sectors slipped away like sand through clenched fists. And behind it all, the shadow of the Ark of Terra loomed, a constant reminder of the strength that exile had forged. Yet amidst the victories, Kane carried the weight of every life lost, every world scarred. He did not speak of glory, he did not revel in triumph. For him, it was not conquest, it was survival, it was justice, it was the righting of a wrong older than the Empire itself. At last, the war reached the core. The imperial capital, once thought untouchable, lay surrounded by fleets bearing banners not of the empire, but of freedom. The High Chancellor locked himself within his palace, his empire reduced to ashes around him. Outside, the people no longer feared him. They no longer bowed. They marched in the streets, chanting the word that had once been forbidden: humanity. The final strike came without ceremony. The Ark of Terra entered orbit, its shadow falling. Across the shining towers of the capital, Kane stood at its bridge, his face carved with resolve. "End this," he commanded, and the fleet obeyed. The last of the imperial defenses crumbled within hours. The palace, once a symbol of unshakable rule, was breached, its banners torn, down by the very people it had enslaved. And with that, the empire fell. The galaxy was free. In the aftermath, humanity did not claim thrones or crowns. They did not rebuild the empire in their own image. Instead, they stood as leaders among equals, guiding but not ruling, reminding the galaxy that power was not meant to dominate, but to protect. Kane, standing before the gathered leaders of countless worlds, spoke the words that would define the new age. We were forgotten. We were cast out. But we endured because we remembered who we were. Let the stars never again belong to tyrants. Let them belong to those who live beneath them, together, free. And so, the galaxy entered a new era. The empire was gone, its chains broken, its name spoken only as a warning of what once was. Humanity, once erased, was now a beacon. They had returned not as conquerors, but as a people who had shown the stars that even in exile, even in darkness, hope could grow, strength could rise, and the forgotten could shake the heavens. And as the fleets dispersed, as the stars grew, quiet once more, the galaxy whispered the truth, a truth that would echo through all ages. The stars once cast humanity out. Now, they would never forget them again.